The human soldier stands alone against the Zarkath attackers, his body a shield between them and the cornered Prilorian female. No one else dares to protect this alien beauty, but Robert Dixon's resolve is unshakable. Alarms blare through the corridors of the Prilorian diplomatic vessel as chaos erupts. The ship shudders under the assault of Zarkath weapons, its hull breached in multiple locations. Smoke fills the air, acrid and thick, as sparks rain down from damaged circuitry. In a narrow passageway, Sarah, a stunningly beautiful Prilorian dignitary, finds herself trapped. Her large luminescent eyes widen in fear as she watches her guards fall back, overwhelmed by the superior firepower of the Zarkath soldiers. The retreating Prilorians cast apologetic glances her way, but their retreat is swift and final. The Zarkath advance, their scaled skin glinting in the emergency lights. Their mandibles click in anticipation as they close in on their prey. Sarah presses herself against the bulkhead, her delicate frame trembling. Suddenly, a new figure bursts onto the scene. Human soldier Robert Dixon, part of an allied peacekeeping force, takes in the situation with a quick sweep of his eyes. His comm link crackles with orders to stand down, to not interfere in alien conflicts. Robert hesitates for a split second, weighing his duty against his conscience. In that moment, Sarah's gaze locks with his. Something passes between them. A plea, a connection. Robert's decision is made. With a burst of speed that surprises even the Zarkath, Robert launches himself at the alien soldiers. His fists connect with scaled flesh, his combat training evident in every precise movement. The Zarkath, caught off guard by the human strength and skill, struggle to regroup. Robert's muscles strain as he grapples with two Zarkath simultaneously. He uses their own weight against them, leveraging his human agility to outmaneuver the larger aliens. One Zarkath falls, then another. Sarah watches in awe as her unlikely savior turns the tide of the battle. As the last Zarkath soldier crumples to the ground, Robert turns to Sarah. "Are you all right?" he asks, his voice gruff but tinged with concern. Sarah nods, unable to speak, her eyes filled with gratitude and something more. The moment is shattered by the arrival of human military personnel. Their weapons are trained on Robert, faces grim. "Soldier Dixon, you are under arrest for violation of interspecies protocols," the lead officer announces. "Stand down immediately." Robert raises his hand slowly, his gaze never leaving Sarah. The Prilorian female steps forward, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative despite her earlier fear. "This human saved my life," she declares. "I demand he be released into Prilorian custody as a cultural exchange." The human officers hesitate, caught between their orders and the request of an important alien dignitary. In the distance, the sounds of Zarkath reinforcements echo through the ship. The standoff intensifies, with Robert at its center. As Robert is led away, Sarah's eyes follow him. Her heart races, not just from the recent danger, but from newfound emotions stirring within her. She knows this human's actions will have far-reaching consequences, potentially reshaping the relationship between their species. In the span of a few minutes, Robert Dixon has violated orders, rescued an alien dignitary, and possibly altered the course of interstellar politics. As he's escorted off the Prilorian ship, he can't help but wonder, was it worth it? One look back at Sarah's face tells him it was. The real challenges, he realizes, are just beginning. The tense standoff aboard the Prilorian diplomatic vessel dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Sarah's authoritative declaration echoed through the corridor, her luminescent eyes fixed on Robert Dixon. The human officers exchanged uncertain glances, their weapons still trained on the soldier who had defied orders to save an alien dignitary. "Lower your weapons," commanded the lead officer reluctantly. "Soldier Dixon, you're to accompany the Prilorian delegation. Consider yourself in their custody until further notice." Robert nodded, his hands slowly lowering to his sides. He cast a final glance at the fallen Zarkath soldiers before following Sarah and her entourage towards the ship's docking bay. The distant sounds of battle faded as they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the vessel. Within hours, Robert found himself aboard a sleek Prilorian shuttle, hurtling through space towards the alien homeworld. The events of the past day swirled in his mind as he gazed out at the star-studded void. Sarah sat across from him, her delicate features illuminated by the soft glow of the shuttle's interior lights. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Your actions were unexpected, but greatly appreciated." Robert shifted in his seat, acutely aware of the cultural chasm between them. "I couldn't stand by and do nothing," he replied, his voice gruff but sincere. The shuttle pierced Prylos Prime's atmosphere, and Robert's breath caught in his throat. The planet's surface came into view, a breathtaking panorama of crystalline structures and bioluminescent landscapes. Towering spires of what appeared to be living crystal stretched towards the sky, their facets refracting the light of twin suns. Forests of strange, glowing vegetation carpeted the land between the alien cities. As they descended towards the capital, Robert's mind raced with the implications of his actions. He had violated interspecies protocols, potentially jeopardizing relations between humans, Prylorians, and Zarkath. Yet as he glanced at Sarah's serene face, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad adjacent to a grand spiraling structure that seemed to pulse with inner light. Sarah led Robert into the building, explaining that the Prylorian High Council had convened an emergency session to address the diplomatic crisis. Inside the council chamber, Robert found himself the center of attention. Dozens of Prylorian eyes, all as luminescent as Sarah's, focused on him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. At the head of the chamber sat Elder Zixara, her age evident in the intricate patterns etched across her bioluminescent skin. Sarah stepped forward, her voice ringing clear as she recounted the events aboard the diplomatic vessel. Robert stood silently, acutely aware of the weight of each word. As Sarah described his actions, emphasizing his strength and bravery, Robert noticed a shift in the council members' demeanor. Many leaned forward, their expressions softening. However, not all were swayed. A stern-faced Prylorian, his military bearing evident even to Robert's human eyes, rose to speak. "I am General Krelvor," he announced, his voice sharp. "While we appreciate the humans' intervention, we cannot ignore the breach of interspecies protocols. This action could be seen as a threat to Prylorian autonomy." The chamber erupted in murmurs, the councillors debating amongst themselves. Elder Zixara raised a hand, silencing the room. "We will consider all aspects of this situation carefully," she declared. "For now, Robert Dixon will remain under Prylorian protection." As the council session adjourned, Robert found himself whisked away to a set of quarters within the Crystal Spire. Sarah accompanied him, appointed as his guide and liaison. Over the next few days, she introduced him to the intricacies of Prylorian culture, patiently explaining customs and biological differences. Robert was fascinated by the alien world around him. The bioluminescent flora that lined the city streets seemed to respond to the emotions of passing Prylorians, shifting colors in a mesmerizing display. He learned that Prylorian biology was intrinsically linked to their environment, with natural cycles playing a crucial role in their lives. As they spent more time together, Robert and Sarah developed a deep connection that transcended their biological differences. Despite the language barrier, they found ways to communicate, with Sarah teaching Robert rudimentary Prylorian phrases and gestures. One evening, as they walked through a garden of glowing, crystal-like plants, Sarah suddenly stumbled. Robert caught her arm, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Sarah's skin flushed with a soft, pulsing light. I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just, our mating cycle is approaching. It happens every 5 years, and the proximity to the time can cause some physical effects." Robert's eyes widened at this revelation, the implications sending his heart pounding. Before he could formulate a response, a commotion from the nearby government complex caught their attention. They hurried back, only to find the High Council in an uproar. Admiral James Hawthorne, a stern-faced human officer, stood in the center of the chamber. His presence could mean only one thing. Earth's military command had arrived to deal with the diplomatic fallout. As Robert entered, Hawthorne's eyes locked onto him, a mixture of frustration and grudging respect evident in his gaze. "The Zarkath have dispatched a battle fleet," Hawthorne announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. "They're demanding Dixon's extradition. We need to find a solution, fast, or we're looking at an interstellar incident that could escalate into full-scale war. The room fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on all present. Robert stepped forward, ready to offer himself up to prevent conflict. But before he could speak, Sarah grabbed his arm, her skin pulsing with an intense light. I can't let you go, she said, her voice strained. My mating cycle. It started early. Our connection, it must have triggered it. She turned to the council, her voice gaining strength. By Prylorian law, potential mates cannot be separated during this crucial period. The council erupted into chaos once more, the already complex situation becoming even more tangled. As arguments flew back and forth, Robert stood in stunned silence, the enormity of the situation crashing over him like a tidal wave. The situation seemed impossibly complex, with interspecies politics, biological imperatives, and potential war hanging in the balance. Before anyone could respond to Sarah's declaration, Admiral Hawthorne's comm link buzzed urgently. His face paled as he listened to the message, then turned to address the council. We have a new development, he announced grimly. Our intelligence suggests the Zarkoth are preparing to dispatch a battle fleet. We need to move quickly. Elder Zixara's luminescent patterns flickered with concern. We cannot risk open conflict. For the safety of all involved, we must remove Robert Dixon from the equation. I have a solution, Hawthorne said, his eyes darting between Robert and Sarah. We have a secure location prepared, an island sanctuary on Prylos Prime, hidden by Earth's most advanced cloaking technology. We can transport Robert and Sarah there immediately. Robert's brow furrowed. An island? But what about... It's not negotiable, soldier. Hawthorne cut him off. This is for your protection and to prevent an interstellar incident. You'll be safe there until we can drive this diplomatically. Within hours, Robert found himself aboard a small, stealthy shuttle, Sarah at his side. As they descended towards Prylos Prime, the island came into view, a lush tropical paradise ringed by crystal-clear waters. The shuttle touched down on a pristine beach, its engines quieting to a whisper. As they stepped onto the sand, Robert's military instincts kicked in. He scanned the tree line, noting potential vantage points and natural barriers. We should establish a perimeter, he said, already planning defensive positions. Sarah nodded, her skin pulsing with a soft glow. I'll identify safe food sources and medicinal plants. My knowledge of Prylorian biology will be useful here. They worked in tandem, Robert setting up basic defenses while Sarah cataloged the island's flora. As days passed, their forced proximity and shared experiences deepened their connection. Robert found himself increasingly drawn to Sarah, fascinated by the subtle changes in her appearance as her mating cycle intensified. Her skin took on an iridescent quality, shimmering in the sunlight. Strange, alluring scents wafted from her, affecting Robert in unexpected ways. His senses seemed sharper. His strength and stamina increased. He caught himself watching her more often, mesmerized by her graceful movements. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching twin suns sink below the horizon, Sarah turned to Robert, her large eyes luminous in the fading light. The mating cycle. It's entering its final phase, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I can feel it changing me, calling to me, and to you. Robert swallowed hard, acutely aware of the heat rising in his body. Sarah, we need to be careful. The consequences of this could be far-reaching. Before Sarah could respond, a low hum filled the air. They jumped to their feet, Robert instinctively moving in front of Sarah protectively. A sleek shuttle materialized on the beach, its cloaking device deactivating. The hatch opened, revealing a woman in a crisp uniform. Dr. Elena Petrova, she introduced herself, stepping onto the sand. Xenobiologist, Admiral Hawthorne sent me to study the effects of Prylorian biology on humans and explore the possibility of human Prylorian reproduction. Robert and Sarah exchanged glances, a mix of surprise and apprehension on their faces. Dr. Petrova's arrival added a new layer of complexity to their already charged situation. Over the next few days, Dr. Petrova conducted a series of tests on both Robert and Sarah. She took blood samples, recorded physiological responses, and asked probing questions about their experiences on the island. Her presence created a strange dynamic, her clinical approach a stark contrast to the intimate connection growing between Robert and Sarah. One afternoon, as Robert underwent another round of tests, Dr. Petrova's eyes widened in shock. This is unprecedented, she muttered, staring at her scanner. Robert, your DNA, it's changing. What do you mean, changing? Robert asked, a hint of alarm in his voice. Dr. Petrova looked up, her expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. The combination of Sarah's pheromones and something in this island's environment, it's triggering adaptations in your genetic structure. You're becoming more compatible with Praelorian biology. The implications of this discovery hung in the air, unspoken but profound. As Robert processed this information, a distant rumble caught his attention. He rushed outside, Sarah and Dr. Petrova close behind. In the sky above, barely visible through the planet's atmosphere, flashes of light erupted. Robert's military training told him exactly what he was seeing. A space battle. The Zarkath, Sarah gasped, her skin pulsing with alarm. They've found us! As the distant battle raged overhead, Robert, Sarah, and Dr. Petrova stood on the beach, their faces illuminated by the flashes in the sky. The sanctuary of their island paradise had been shattered, thrusting them back into the heart of an interstellar conflict. With the Zarkath fleet closing in and Robert's changing biology presenting new possibilities and dangers, the trio faced an uncertain future fraught with peril and potential. Potential and danger. As they contemplated their next move, a deafening roar shattered the tense silence. The Zarkath fleet had broken through the planet's defensive line. A swarm of dropships descended from the smoke-filled sky, their engines howling as they approached the island. Robert's military instincts kicked into high gear. "We need to move now," he shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and gesturing for Dr. Petrova to follow. They sprinted across the beach towards the dense jungle, the sound of Zarkath weapons fire growing closer with each passing second. As they reached the tree line, Robert felt a surge of energy course through his body. His senses sharpened, his muscles tensed with newfound strength. He easily leapt over fallen logs and navigated through the thick underbrush, pulling Sarah and Dr. Petrova along. "This way," Robert called out, leading them towards a rocky outcropping he had scouted earlier. "There's a cave system that might provide shelter." They reached the cave entrance just as the first Zarkath soldiers landed on the beach. Robert ushered Sarah and Dr. Petrova inside, then turned to face the approaching threat. His enhanced vision allowed him to spot the alien warriors through the dense foliage. The Zarkath, clad in sleek dark armor, moved with practiced precision. Their leader, Commander Vexicor, barked orders in a harsh, guttural language. Robert's mind raced, formulating a defense strategy using the limited resources at his disposal. "Sarah, Dr. Petrova," he whispered urgently, "I need you to stay hidden. I'll try to hold them off." Sarah's skin pulsed with a mix of fear and tenacity. "No, Robert, I won't let you face them alone." Before he could protest, she stepped out of the cave, her body glowing with an intense, pulsating light. The nearest Zarkath soldiers recoiled, momentarily blinded by the sudden burst of bioluminescence. Robert seized the opportunity, launching himself at the disoriented aliens. His enhanced strength took them by surprise as he engaged in hand-to-hand combat, disarming two Zarkath before they could react. Sarah joined the fray, her Praelorian agility allowing her to dodge energy blasts with ease. She used her bioluminescence to create dazzling patterns, further disorienting the Zarkath soldiers. As the battle intensified, Dr. Petrova watched from the cave entrance, her scientific mind racing. She noticed that whenever Robert and Sarah moved in sync, the Zarkath weapons seemed to malfunction. An idea began to form. "Robert! Sarah!" she called out. "Your combined energy signature is interfering with their technology. Stay close to each other." Understanding dawned on the pair. They moved together, their bodies in perfect harmony. As they fought side by side, the Zarkath weapons sputtered and died, leaving the alien soldiers vulnerable. Commander Vexicor, realizing the tide of battle was turning, ordered his troops to regroup. "Fall back," he snarled. "Prepare the heavy artillery." As the Zarkath retreated, Robert and Sarah took a moment to catch their breath. Their eyes met, a spark of something deeper than camaraderie passing between them. Suddenly, a familiar hum filled the air. A sleek Pralorian scout ship materialized above the treetops, its weapons trained on the Zarkath position. The ship's captain, Lirana, her voice crackling over an external comm system, addressed the combatants below. "This is Captain Lirana of the Pralorian Defense Force. Zarkath forces, you are in violation of galactic law. Stand down immediately." The arrival of the Pralorian ship changed the dynamics of the battle. Commander Vexicor, caught between the combined might of Robert and Sarah on the ground and the Pralorian ship above, found himself in an untenable position. Meanwhile, Dr. Petrova had been working feverishly in the cave, cobbling together a device from her research equipment. She emerged holding a small, pulsing orb. "I've amplified the energy signature created by your combined biology," she explained hurriedly to Robert and Sarah. "This should disrupt their systems on a larger scale." Robert took the device, nodding his understanding. He and Sarah shared a look, then began to advance on the Zarkath position, the amplifier held between them. As they approached, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Zarkath weapons and communication devices sparked and shut down. Panic spread through their ranks as they found themselves cut off and defenseless. Commander Vexcor, his own systems failing, raised his hands in surrender. "We yield!" he growled, his eyes burning with terrifying rage. As the Pralorian ship landed and Lirana's security team began to secure the Zarkath prisoners, Robert and Sarah finally allowed themselves to relax. They turned to each other, their bodies still humming with residual energy from the battle and their heightened connection. "We did it," Sarah breathed, her skin glowing with a soft, pulsating light. Robert nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Together," he said softly. As the adrenaline of battle faded, the implications of what had transpired began to sink in. The unique synergy between human and Pralorian biology had not only saved their lives, but had also opened up a world of possibilities. Dr. Petrova approached them, her eyes wide with excitement. "The data I've collected is extraordinary," she said. "The potential applications of this energy signature are enormous. This could change everything." Captain Lirana joined them, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Elder Zixera and Admiral Hawthorne need to be informed immediately," she said. "This development will have far-reaching consequences for both our species." As the group began to discuss their next steps, a distant rumble reminded them that the conflict was a long way to go. The Zarkath fleet still loomed in the planet's orbit, and the diplomatic fallout from this incident was yet to be addressed. Robert and Sarah exchanged glances, both aware that their actions and their deepening connection would be at the center of whatever came next. The battle for the island had been won, but the true challenges were only beginning. The battle for the island had been won, but the true challenges were only just starting to unfold. Captain Lirana's voice cut through the tension. "We need to evacuate immediately. Our sensors detect more Zarkath ships entering the atmosphere." Robert nodded, his military training kicking in. "Agreed. How soon can we be ready for departure?" "Now," Lirana replied, gesturing towards her ship. "We've already secured the Zarkath prisoners. Let's move." As they boarded the sleek Pralorian scout ship, Robert cast a final glance at the island. His enhanced vision caught sight of something unexpected. The vegetation, damaged during the battle, was already showing signs of rapid regeneration. "Sarah, Dr. Petrova, look," he said, pointing out the viewport. "The island, it's healing itself." Dr. Petrova's eyes widened. "Fascinating. The energy field we created must have accelerated the natural regenerative processes of the ecosystem." Before they could discuss further, the ship's engines roared to life. As they ascended through the atmosphere, the island grew smaller, its lush green surface marred by scorch marks that were already beginning to fade. The journey to the Pralorian capital was tense. Robert and Sarah sat close together, their bodies still humming with residual energy. Dr. Petrova busied herself with her data, muttering excitedly about the potential applications of their discovery. Upon arrival, they were immediately escorted to the High Council chamber. The Grand Hall was filled with an array of beings from across the galaxy. Robert recognized the distinctive features of Arcturians, Valorians, and Tau Cetians among the assembled delegates. Elder Zixara stood at the center, her expression grave. Welcome, honored guests. We face a crisis that threatens not just the Prylorian people, but the stability of our entire sector. As Dr. Petrova presented her findings, a ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. The revelation of the energy field created by Robert and Sarah's biological synchronization sent shockwaves through the assembly. An Arcturian delegate, his crystalline form shimmering, spoke up. If this energy can disrupt Zarkath technology, it could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Before the discussion could continue, the chamber doors swung open. Admiral Hawthorne strode in, flanked by Earth's diplomatic corps and scientific advisors. Apologies for our late arrival, Hawthorne said, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Robert and Sarah. I see we have much to discuss. The next few hours were a whirlwind of debates, proposals, and speculation. Robert and Sarah found themselves at the center of it all, their unique bond the subject of intense scrutiny. We propose a joint human Prylorian research initiative, Hawthorne announced, to fully understand and develop this energy field technology. As political discussions intensified, Robert and Sarah were whisked away to a state-of-the-art medical facility. A team of Prylorian and human scientists subjected them to a battery of tests, probing the extent of their physiological changes. Remarkable, a Prylorian scientist exclaimed, examining Robert's latest genetic scan. Your DNA continues to adapt, becoming increasingly compatible with Prylorian biology. Sarah, undergoing her own examinations, called out from across the room. Robert, they're saying my genetic structure is showing signs of human compatibility. Is that even possible? Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the facility. A harried-looking aide burst into the room. The High Council has declared a state of emergency, he announced breathlessly. The Zarkoth have launched attacks on our outlying colonies. Robert and Sarah exchanged worried glances. The weight of their potential importance in this conflict pressed down on them. As they were escorted back to the council chamber, Robert noticed Sarah's skin pulsing with an intense glow. He reached out, taking her hand in his. The moment their skin made contact, a surge of energy passed between them, momentarily disrupting the lights in the corridor. Did you feel that? Sarah asked, her eyes wide. Robert nodded, acutely aware of the deepening connection between them. As they entered the chamber, they found it in chaos. General Krelvor was arguing vehemently for immediate military action, while Elder Zixara advocated for a more measured approach. We must form an interspecies task force, Zixara insisted. This threat affects us all. As the debate raged on, Robert and Sarah found themselves drawn to each other, their bodies synchronizing unconsciously. The stress of the situation, the constant scrutiny, and the weight of their potential importance pushed them closer together. In a quiet moment amidst the chaos, their eyes met. The attraction that had been building since their time on the island reached a crescendo. Without a word, they slipped away from the crowded chamber, seeking a moment of privacy. They found an empty observation deck overlooking the gleaming Prylorian capital. As the twin suns set, casting the city in a warm glow, Robert and Sarah finally gave in to their mutual desire. Their bodies came together in a fusion of human and Prylorian biology. As they joined, a surge of energy unlike anything they had experienced before pulsed through them. The energy field around them intensified, its power growing exponentially. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. Alarms blared as the energy surge disrupted the building's power systems. As they hastily separated, a team of scientists burst into the room, led by Dr. Petrova. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, her mind already racing with the implications of what had occurred. This changes everything, she muttered, her voice barely audible over the alarms. Unbeknownst to them all, hidden cameras captured the entire incident. In a darkened room elsewhere in the city, a figure watched the footage with keen interest. Commander Zexkal, leader of the Zarkath's elite covert ops team, smiled coldly. So, he hissed, his voice filled with malice, this is the weapon they think will defeat us. How interesting. As Robert and Sarah grappled with the implications of their actions and the escalating galactic conflict, they remained unaware of the new threat closing in on them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Prilorian relations and the balance of power in the galaxy. Galaxy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Prilorian relations and the balance of power in the cosmos. As the alarms continued to blare, Robert and Sarah were quickly ushered back to the main research facility. The corridors buzzed with frantic activity as scientists and military personnel rushed to contain the aftermath of their unintended energy surge. Dr. Petrova met them at the entrance to the lab, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and concern. "We need to run more tests immediately," she said, guiding them towards the examination area. "The energy output from your interaction was off the charts." Robert and Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances as they were led to separate examination tables. The lab hummed with activity as a team of human and Prilorian scientists swarmed around them, attaching sensors and taking readings. "Your hormone levels are fluctuating rapidly," a Prilorian scientist announced, studying a holographic display of Sarah's vitals. "And there's a marked increase in cellular regeneration." Robert winced as a needle pierced his skin, drawing a sample of his blood. He watched as the vial filled with a strange, shimmering liquid that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "Fascinating," Dr. Petrova murmured, examining the sample. "The energy field appears to have altered your blood chemistry at a fundamental level." As the test continued, Robert couldn't shake the feeling of being a lab rat. He caught Sarah's eye across the room, seeing his own discomfort mirrored in her expression. Their moment of silent communication was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Hawthorne and Elder Zixara. The two leaders wore grim expressions as they surveyed the scene. "We need to talk," Hawthorne said, his voice low and serious. "The situation has escalated." Robert and Sarah were led to a secure briefing room where they found General Krelvor already waiting. The Prilorian military leader paced restlessly, his agitation palpable. "The Zarkath have launched attacks on our outlying colonies," Elder Zixara began, her voice heavy with concern. "We believe they're trying to draw our forces away from the capital." Admiral Hawthorne stepped forward, activating a holographic display of the local star system. "We've proposed the formation of a joint human-Prilorian task force to combat this threat," he explained. "The Joint Interstellar Defense Initiative, or JIDI for short." Robert's military instincts kicked in as he studied the tactical display. "What's our current defensive capability?" he asked. General Krelvor grunted. "Not enough. The Zarkath have us outnumbered and outgunned. That's why we need to accelerate our research into your unique abilities." Sarah frowned, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "What exactly does that mean for us?" Before anyone could answer, an aide burst into the room. "Apologies for the interruption," he said breathlessly, "but we've detected unauthorized access to our secure networks. We believe Zarkath infiltrators may have breached our defenses." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. General Krelvor barked orders into his communicator, while Elder Zixara conferred urgently with her advisors. Admiral Hawthorne turned to Robert and Sarah. "We need to move you to a secure location immediately," he said. "You're too valuable to risk falling into Zarkath hands." As they were hurried through the corridors of the research facility, Robert's enhanced senses picked up signs of the impending threat. The faint smell of ozone, the subtle vibration in the floor, the barely perceptible shift in air pressure, all pointed to an imminent attack. They reached a heavily fortified laboratory on the outskirts of the complex. Dr. Petrova was already there, frantically gathering research data and equipment. "We need to continue our work," she insisted as they entered. "The key to defeating the Zarkath lies in understanding and harnessing your unique energy field." Robert and Sarah found themselves once again subjected to a battery of tests and experiments. The urgency of the situation lent a frantic energy to the proceedings, with Dr. Petrova and her team working tirelessly to unlock the secrets of their biological synchronization. Hours passed in a blur of scans, blood draws, and energy field measurements. Robert and Sarah's bodies hummed with residual energy, their connections seeming to grow stronger with each passing moment. Suddenly, the facility shook with a massive explosion. Alarms blared as the lights flickered and died, plunging the lab into darkness. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. "They're here," Robert said grimly, his body tensing for combat. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors, growing closer by the second. Robert and Sarah exchanged a look, silently acknowledging the gravity of their situation. As the lab's reinforced doors began to glow red-hot, signaling the Zarkath's imminent breach, Robert and Sarah stood side by side, their bodies unconsciously synchronizing. The air around them crackled with energy, a visible manifestation of their unique bond. The doors exploded inward, and the first wave of Zarkath soldiers poured into the lab. Robert sprang into action, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to engage the alien warriors in close combat. Sarah's bioluminescence flared, disorienting the attackers and giving her the opportunity to outmaneuver them. Dr. Petrova scrambled to secure her research data, keenly aware that the fate of their efforts hung in the balance. As she worked, a tall, imposing figure emerged from the smoke and debris. Commander Zexcal, his eyes fixed on the human Prylorian couple with predatory intensity. "At last," the Zarkath commander hissed, his voice filled with malicious anticipation. "The weapon that could turn the tide of this war. How disappointing." Robert turned to face this new threat, his body coiled with tension. As he prepared to engage Zexcal in what promised to be a grueling battle, Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Robert, they've planted explosives throughout the facility." He hesitated, torn between the immediate threat of the Zarkath commander and the larger danger posed by the explosives. In that moment of indecision, Zexcal struck, his attack driving Robert back and separating him from Sarah. As the battle raged around them, Robert and Sarah faced an impossible choice: pursue Zexcal and the stolen data, or save the facility and the lives within it. The fate of not just their research, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance of their decision. The fate of not just their research, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance of their next move. Robert's enhanced senses picked up the faint beeping of multiple explosive devices scattered throughout the facility. He locked eyes with Sarah, a silent understanding passing between them. "We can't let these people die," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert nodded, his heart made. "Agreed. We'll have to let Zexcal go. For now." Without another word, they sprang into action. Robert's military training kicked in as he quickly formulated a plan. "I'll handle the explosives," he said, already moving towards the nearest device. "Sarah, focus on getting everyone out of here." Sarah's skin pulsed with an intense glow as she channeled her newfound abilities. "On it," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Robert raced through the smoke-filled corridors, his enhanced agility allowing him to navigate the debris with ease. He located the first explosive device, a sleek black cylinder pulsing with an ominous red light. Drawing on his training and newly acquired Prylorian-influenced abilities, he worked with lightning speed to disarm it. As his fingers deftly manipulated the device's inner workings, Robert marveled at how naturally the complex series of actions came to him. It was as if his human knowledge and Prylorian enhancements had merged, creating a hybrid skill set that surpassed both. Meanwhile, Sarah's bioluminescence cut through the thick smoke, guiding terrified scientists and staff members to safety. Her voice, amplified by some unknown aspect of her transformation, carried clearly through the din of alarms and panicked shouts. "This way, follow the light," she called out, leading a group of Prylorian researchers towards the emergency exits. As she worked, Sarah felt a strange connection to the frightened aliens around her. Their fear and confusion resonated within her, driving her to push harder, move faster. She realized that her empathy had been heightened along with her physical abilities, allowing her to instinctively understand and respond to the needs of those around her. Robert continued his frantic race against time, locating and disarming bomb after bomb. With each successful deactivation, he felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, as if the very act of saving lives was fueling his newfound powers. Just as Robert neutralized the final explosive, a squad of human and Prylorian soldiers burst into the facility. Leading them was Admiral Hawthorne, his face grim but determined. "Status report," Hawthorne barked, surveying the scene of destruction. Robert straightened, suddenly aware of how disheveled he must look. "Explosives neutralized, sir. Sarah's evacuating the last of the personnel now." Hawthorne nodded, a flicker of relief passing over his features. "Good work, both of you, but I'm afraid our troubles are far from finished." As if on cue, Dr. Petrova emerged from a nearby lab, clutching a data pad to her chest. Her normally pristine lab coat was smudged with soot, and a thin trickle of blood ran down her temple. "Admiral," she said, her voice hoarse from the smoke, "I've implemented the failsafe. The stolen data is now encrypted with a biomarker keyed to both Robert and Sarah's DNA." Robert and Sarah exchanged glances, the implications of this news sinking in. They were now more valuable than ever, not just to their allies, but to their enemies as well. Hawthorne's communicator crackled to life, filling the air with static and urgent voices. He listened intently for a moment before addressing the group. "The Prilorian High Council is convening an emergency session. General Krelvor is pushing for immediate military action against the Zarkoth." Sarah stepped forward, her skin still glowing faintly. "What about Elder Zixara? Surely she sees the need for a more measured approach." Hawthorne's expression darkened. "She's arguing for caution, but the council is shaken. This attack on Prilorian soil has many calling for retaliation." As the gravity of the situation settled over them, Robert felt a familiar tension building in his muscles. The soldier in him itched for action, but he knew that rushing headlong into conflict could have disastrous consequences. Dr. Petrova cleared her throat, drawing their attention. "There might be another way," she said, her eyes glinting with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "A procedure that could amplify your biological synchronization. It's risky, but it could provide the breakthrough we need in defensive technology." Robert and Sarah locked eyes, a silent conversation passing between them. The connection they shared had already transformed their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. The prospect of amplifying that bond was both thrilling and terrifying. Before they could respond, another explosion rocked the facility. Hawthorne's communicator erupted with frantic reports. "Zarkath forces are mobilizing for a large-scale assault on Prylos Prime," Hawthorne announced, his voice tight with tension. This attack was just the beginning. As alarms blared and soldiers rushed to defensive positions, Robert and Sarah found themselves at a crossroads. The fate of multiple species hung in the balance, and their decision could tip the scales of the coming conflict. The air around them crackled with energy, a physical manifestation of the power they now wielded. As they contemplated their next move, neither Robert nor Sarah could shake the feeling that whatever choice they made would irrevocably alter the course of galactic history. In the distance, the sound of approaching Zarkath ships filled the air, a grim reminder of the imminent threat. Time was running out, and the moment for action had arrived. Robert and Sarah exchanged a determined look, their decision made in that instant. "Dr. Petrova," Robert called out, his voice cutting through the chaos, "we're ready for the procedure." The scientist's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and apprehension crossing her face. "Are you certain? The risks—" "We don't have a choice," Sarah interjected, her skin pulsing with a soft glow. "It's our best chance to turn the tide." Admiral Hawthorne nodded grimly. "I'll arrange for immediate transport to the underground facility. We'll provide you with the best security we have." Within minutes, Robert and Sarah found themselves being rushed through a series of heavily fortified tunnels beneath the Prilorian capital. The distant sound of explosions reverberated through the rock, a constant reminder of the battle raging above. They arrived at a state-of-the-art medical bay, where Dr. Petrova and her team were already preparing the equipment. The centerpiece of the room was a pair of sleek, cylindrical biochambers filled with a viscous, translucent gel. "This specialized fluid will facilitate the genetic manipulation," Dr. Petrova explained, as Robert and Sarah were helped into medical gowns. "The process will be intense, and I won't lie, it will be painful." Robert gripped Sarah's hand, feeling the energy that constantly flowed between them intensify. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at his insides. As they were lowered into the gel-filled chambers, Robert caught a final glimpse of Sarah's face. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of commitment and fear that he knew mirrored his own. The chamber sealed with a hiss, and Robert felt the cool gel envelop his body. For the first few minutes, there was only the sensation of floating and the muffled sounds of the medical team's voices. Then, without warning, pain lanced through every nerve in Robert's body. He arched his back, a silent scream trapped in his throat, as the gel around him began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. Through the haze of agony, Robert could sense Sarah's presence more acutely than ever before. It was as if their very atoms were reaching out to each other, straining against the physical barriers that separated them. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of pain and flashing lights. Robert's consciousness wavered, drifting in and out of reality. In his lucid moments, he could hear the urgent voices of the medical team, catching snippets of their concerned conversations. Vitals are spiking. Genetic markers aligning at an unprecedented rate. Energy readings off the charts. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility, their shrill cries cutting through the fog of pain. Robert's eyes snapped open, his military instincts kicking in despite his weakened state. Through the distortion of the biochamber, he saw Dr. Petrova's face, tight with worry as she spoke urgently into a communicator. The words, Zarkoth invasion fleet, and earlier than expected filtered through to him, sending a jolt of adrenaline through his system. The procedure was only half complete, but the battle for Prylos Prime had already begun. In the control room adjacent to the medical bay, Admiral Hawthorne's voice crackled over the speakers. The Zarkoth are launching a full-scale assault on the capital. General Krelvor and I are coordinating our defenses, but we're outnumbered. Dr. Petrova, what's the status of Robert and Sarah? Dr. Petrova's fingers flew over her console, her eyes darting between readouts. We're at a critical juncture, Admiral. Stopping now could have catastrophic consequences for both of them. We need more time. The facility shook with a massive impact, dust raining down from the ceiling. The sounds of combat grew closer, energy weapons discharging, the clash of metal on metal, shouts of pain and defiance. We're under attack, a security officer yelled, rushing into the medical bay. Zarkoth commandos have breached the outer defenses. They're heading this way. Dr. Petrova's face set in unbreakable spirit. Seal all entrances to this section. We cannot let them interrupt the procedure. She turned back to her instruments, pushing buttons and adjusting levels with frantic energy. Initiating final phase now. May the stars have mercy on us all. Inside the biochambers, Robert and Sarah's bodies convulsed as a surge of energy coursed through them. The gel around them began to swirl and churn, taking on a luminescent quality that grew brighter by the second. Alarms on the medical equipment screamed warnings as the patient's vital signs fluctuated wildly. Dr. Petrova, her face bathed in the otherworldly glow emanating from the chambers, made a split-second decision. Her hand hovered over a large red button labeled Emergency Termination for a fraction of a second before moving to a different set of controls. "What are you doing?" her assistant cried out in alarm. "Pushing beyond the planned parameters," Dr. Petrova replied, her voice tight with tension. "It's our only chance." The energy building within the biochambers reached a fever pitch. Robert and Sarah's bodies arched in perfect synchronization, their mouths open in silent screams. A blinding flash filled the room, followed by a shockwave that sent equipment crashing to the floor and knocked the medical team off their feet. As the light faded and the dust settled, an eerie silence fell over the medical bay. The biochambers hissed open, tendrils of luminescent mist spilling out onto the floor. Slowly, two figures emerged. Robert and Sarah stood unsteadily, their bodies enveloped in a faint pulsating glow. They moved with an otherworldly grace, as if gravity itself had less of a hold on them. Their eyes, when they opened, shimmered with an inner light that spoke of power beyond human comprehension. Dr. Petrova approached cautiously, her handheld scanner beeping frantically as it attempted to process the readings. "Incredible," she breathed. "Your genetic structures have been fundamentally altered. The energy field? It's self-sustaining now." Before anyone could react further, the doors to the medical bay exploded inward. A squad of Zarkoth commandos poured through the opening, their alien weapons trained on the humans within. Robert and Sarah turned as one to face the threat, their movements perfectly synchronized. As their hands clasped together, the energy field surrounding them expanded explosively. A wave of invisible force radiated outward, washing over friend and foe alike. The effect on the Zarkath was immediate and dramatic. Their weapons sputtered and died, the lights on their armor blinking out. The aliens stumbled, clearly disoriented by the sudden failure of their technology. "Their systems, they're all dead," one of the human security officers exclaimed, his own weapon still functioning perfectly. As the implications of what had just occurred sank in, Admiral Hawthorne's voice once again filled the room, urgency evident in every word. "Dr. Petrova, we need Robert and Sarah topside immediately. The Zarkath fleet is decimating our defenses. If there's even a chance their new abilities can turn the tide, we have to take it." Robert and Sarah exchanged a look of silent communication, their newfound connection allowing them to share thoughts and emotions without words. They nodded in unison, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they were quickly ushered towards the facility's exit, a new alarm began to sound. Long-range sensors had detected a massive warship entering the system, the flagship of the Zarkath Grand Fleet. The true test of Robert and Sarah's transformation was about to begin, and the fate of galaxies hung in the balance. Balance and the fate of galaxies hung in the balance. As Robert and Sarah were quickly ushered towards the facility's exit, the full weight of their responsibility settled upon them. The journey to the surface was a blur of motion and tension. Security personnel flanked them on all sides, weapons at the ready as they navigated through a maze of corridors and emergency stairwells. The distant rumble of explosions grew louder with each passing moment, a grim reminder of the battle raging above. As they emerged from the underground complex, Robert and Sarah were momentarily blinded by the harsh light of day. When their eyes adjusted, the scene before them stole their breath away. The sky was filled with thousands of ships, locked in a deadly dance of fire and destruction. Zarkath vessels, sleek and predatory, clashed with the combined human and Prylorian defense forces. Energy weapons crisscrossed the atmosphere, leaving trails of ionized particles in their wake. A modified Prylorian shuttle waited nearby, its engines humming with barely suppressed power. As Robert and Sarah approached, they saw Admiral Hawthorne and General Krelvor emerge from a mobile command center. "We don't have much time," Hawthorne said, his voice tight with urgency. "The Zarkath flagship has just entered the system. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered." General Krelvor, his facial tentacles twitching with agitation, pointed to a holographic display. "Our forces are spread thin. We need you to disable as many enemy ships as possible, starting with the smaller vessels and working your way up." Robert nodded, feeling the energy field around him, and Sarah pulse in response to their heightened emotions. "We're ready, sir. Just tell us where to go." As if on cue, a squad of armored soldiers approached, led by a lithe Prylorian female with iridescent skin. "Captain Lairana, Jaidi Rapid Response Team," she introduced herself. "We'll be your escort for this mission." The group quickly boarded the shuttle with Robert and Sarah taking central positions. As the craft lifted off, escorted by a squadron of fighters, Robert felt a strange sensation. He turned to Sarah only to find her already looking at him with wide eyes. "Did you just—" he began. Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and apprehension. "I heard your thoughts, clear as day." Their newfound telepathic connection hummed between them, allowing them to share not just words, but sensations and emotions. As the shuttle accelerated towards its first target, Robert and Sarah clasped hands, their energy fields merging and expanding. Captain Lairana's voice cut through their concentration. "First wave of Zarkath destroyers incoming. Prepare yourselves." Robert and Sarah locked eyes, a wordless understanding passing between them. As one, they focused their will, directing the pulsing energy that surrounded them outward. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The nearest Zarkath ships began to falter, their weapon systems sputtering and dying. Shields flickered and failed, while propulsion systems went offline. The disabled vessels drifted aimlessly, easy prey for the Allied forces that swarmed to take advantage. Elation surged through the shuttle's crew, but Robert and Sarah had no time to celebrate. Already they were moving towards the next cluster of enemy ships, their hands still tightly clasped as they channeled their power. As they worked their way through the Zarkath fleet, Robert and Sarah felt the strain of their efforts. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, and Robert tasted the coppery tang of blood in his mouth. Through their mental link, he could sense Sarah's growing exhaustion mirroring his own. "Your vital signs are fluctuating dangerously," Dr. Petrova's voice crackled over the comm system. "You need to pace yourselves or risk severe physiological damage." Before they could respond, the shuttle rocked violently. Outside, space lit up with a barrage of enemy fire. "The Zarkath are concentrating their forces on us," Captain Lirana shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "They've realized the threat we pose." Through the viewport, Robert watched as swarms of Zarkath interceptors descended upon them. The escort fighters engaged in fierce dogfights, creating a protective bubble around the shuttle as it weaved through the chaos. Despite their exhaustion, Robert and Sarah redoubled their efforts. With each pulse of their energy field, more enemy ships fell silent. The tide of battle was turning, but the cost was etched in the lines of pain on their faces. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell over the battlefield. The Zarkath flagship had arrived, its hull overflowing with weapons capable of reducing entire continents to ash. As Robert and Sarah watched in horror, the behemoth began its descent towards Prylos Prime. Admiral Hawthorne's voice, tight with scarcely controlled fear, filled the shuttle. "All available units converge on the flagship. We can't let it reach the surface." Robert turned to Sarah, seeing his own drive reflected in her eyes. Without a word, they understood what needed to be done. As the shuttle changed course to intercept the descending warship, they gathered the last reserves of their strength. The flagship loomed before them, a mountain of metal and energy shrugging off attacks from the Allied forces, as if they were mere insects. Robert and Sarah stood, their bodies glowing with power as they prepared for one final, desperate attempt to end the invasion. As they approached the massive vessel, Robert and Sarah's mental link deepened. In that moment, they were more than two individuals. They were a single entity, united in purpose and power. The energy field around them pulsed with blinding intensity, reaching out towards the Zarkath flagship. The shuttle streaked towards its target, weaving through a storm of enemy fire. Robert and Sarah stood at its heart, conduits for a power they barely understood but knew could change the course of history. As they prepared to unleash the full force of their abilities, the fate of Prylos Prime, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Balance hung in the balance. As the shuttle accelerated towards the looming Zarkath flagship, Robert and Sarah braced themselves for the ultimate test of their newfound abilities. The energy field surrounding them pulsed with blinding intensity, growing stronger with each passing moment. Robert felt a warm trickle down his upper lip and realized his nose was bleeding. A quick glance at Sarah confirmed she was experiencing the same. Despite the physical toll, they maintained their focus, their mental link allowing them to coordinate their efforts with uncanny precision. Captain Lirana's voice cut through the tension. "Brace for impact! Enemy weapon systems engaging!" The flagship, a behemoth of alien technology, unleashed a barrage of advanced weaponry. Beams of searing energy and plasma torpedoes streaked towards them, turning space into a deadly light show. Lirana's hands flew over the controls, the shuttle weaving through the onslaught with impossible grace. Robert watched in horror as their escort fighters moved to intercept the incoming fire. One by one, they exploded in brilliant flashes, sacrificing themselves to buy the shuttle precious seconds. "We're almost in range," Lirana called out, her voice strained with concentration. "Whatever you're going to do it now." Robert turned to Sarah, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. They joined hands, channeling their combined energy into a massive surge. The air around them crackled with power, and Robert felt as if every cell in his body was on fire. With a shared mental push, they released the built-up energy. A wave of blinding light erupted from the shuttle, expanding outward at an incredible speed. It engulfed the Zarkath flagship, washing over its hull like a tsunami of pure energy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. System after system across the massive vessel began to fail. Weapon emplacements went dark, shield generators sputtered and died, and the massive engines that had propelled it across the galaxy fell silent. Inside the shuttle, Robert and Sarah collapsed to their knees, gasping for breath. The strain of their effort left them trembling, blood now flowing freely from their noses and ears. Through their mental link, Robert could feel Sarah's exhaustion mirroring his own. Admiral Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "By the stars, they've done it! The flagship is disabled. All units, prepare boarding parties. We're taking that ship." Despite their fatigue, Robert and Sarah exchanged a determined look. They had come this far. They couldn't stop now. "We're going with them," Robert said, his voice hoarse but resolute. Sarah nodded, wiping blood from her chin. Together. The shuttle docked with the now powerless Zarkath flagship, joining a swarm of other Allied vessels. As the airlock cycled, Robert and Sarah stepped out alongside a team of Jedi operatives, their energy field providing a shimmer of protection around the group. The interior of the Zarkath ship was a maze of twisted corridors and alien architecture. Emergency lighting cast an eerie glow over everything, shadows dancing as they moved deeper into the vessel. The boarding party encountered pockets of resistance, Zarkath crew members armed with crude projectile weapons and melee arms, their advanced technology rendered useless by Robert and Sarah's energy field. As they fought their way towards the command center, Robert marveled at how naturally he and Sarah worked together. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, each anticipating the other's actions before they happened. When a Zarkath warrior lunged at Sarah with a wicked-looking blade, Robert was already there, deflecting the blow and allowing Sarah to deliver a devastating counterattack. The closer they got to their objective, the fiercer the resistance became. Turning a corner, they found themselves face-to-face with a group of Zarkath royal guards. These warriors, clad in energy-insulated armor, charged forward with fearsome war cries. The ensuing battle was brutal and chaotic. Robert's enhanced strength allowed him to go toe-to-toe with the physically imposing Zarkath, while Sarah's Prylorian agility kept her one step ahead of their attacks. The Jedi operatives fought with practiced efficiency, but even they struggled against these elite foes. With a final push, they broke through the guards' defenses and burst into the command center. There, towering over everything, stood Grand Overlord Vexithar. The Zarkath leader's iridescent scales shimmered in the dim light, his cybernetic enhancements giving him an otherworldly appearance. "You dare invade my ship?" Vexithar's voice boomed, filled with equal parts rage and disbelief. "I will crush you myself." The Overlord activated a personal shield generator, the last piece of functioning Zarkath technology on the ship. With surprising speed for his size, he lunged at Robert, engaging him in single combat. The battle between man and alien was like nothing Robert had ever experienced. Vexithar's centuries of combat experience and cybernetic advantages made him a formidable opponent. Robert found himself pushed to the limit, relying on his newfound powers and human adaptability to stay in the fight. Sarah, unable to penetrate the shield, focused on keeping the other Zarkath at bay. Through their mental link, she fed Robert tactical insights and warnings, giving him a crucial edge. "His left side," Sarah's voice rang in Robert's mind. "There's a weak spot in his cybernetics." Robert feinted right, then struck with all his might at Vexithar's left flank. The blow connected, sending a shower of sparks from the alien's cybernetic implants. The shield generator flickered, its steady hum faltering for a split second. In that moment, Sarah acted. She unleashed a concentrated burst of their shared energy, targeting the damaged cybernetics. The pulse overloaded Vexithar's systems, sending arcs of electricity coursing over his massive frame. With a deafening roar, the Zarkath leader crashed to the ground, his body twitching as his cybernetic enhancements short-circuited. He lay there, incapacitated but still breathing, his once mighty form now helpless. As the realization of their victory sank in, Robert felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He turned to Sarah, seeing his own fatigue reflected in her eyes. Their bodies, pushed far beyond their limits, began to shut down. The last thing Robert saw before darkness took him was Sarah's face, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. Then as one, they collapsed into each other's arms, slipping into unconsciousness as the sounds of celebration erupted around them. In the wake of their incredible feat, Robert and Sarah lay still, their bodies continuing to evolve even as they slumbered. As medical teams rushed to their aid, the question of what they might become and whether they would ever wake up loomed large over the hard-won victory. The medical team worked frantically, attaching monitoring devices and stabilizing the unconscious pair as they were rushed to a specialized facility. Days turned into weeks as Robert and Sarah remained unresponsive, their bodies undergoing continuous changes that baffled even the most experienced human and Prilorian scientists. Dr. Petrova, leading the medical team, pored over data readouts and test results, her brow furrowed in concentration. Their genetic structure is still in flux, she explained to Admiral Hawthorne and Elder Zixara during one of their daily briefings. It's as if their DNA is rewriting itself, incorporating elements of both human and Prilorian biology, but also something else. The room housing Robert and Sarah hummed with advanced medical equipment. Their bodies lay motionless on adjacent beds, surrounded by a faint, pulsating aura. Monitors displayed a constant stream of data, tracking every minute change in their physiology. As the weeks wore on, tension grew both within the facility and beyond its walls. News of the hybrid heroes had spread across Earth and Prylos Prime, sparking heated debates and protests. Outside the medical center, crowds gathered daily, their chants and shouts audible even through the thick walls. "We can't keep them hidden forever," Admiral Hawthorne said, his voice heavy with concern. "The longer they remain in this state, the more speculation grows." Elder Zixara nodded, her luminescent eyes reflecting the soft glow emanating from Robert and Sarah. "We must be patient. Their awakening could change everything." On the 43rd day since the battle, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Petrova rushed into the room, her team close behind. Robert's fingers had twitched, ever so slightly. "Brain activity is spiking," one of the assistants called out, eyes fixed on a holographic display. "Both of them!" Over the next few hours, signs of consciousness grew stronger. Eyelids fluttered, breathing patterns changed, and the energy field surrounding them pulsed with increasing intensity. Dr. Petrova and her team worked tirelessly, adjusting medications and monitoring vital signs. Finally, Robert's eyes opened, followed moments later by Sarah's. They blinked, adjusting to the light, then turned to face each other. No words were spoken, but their gazes locked with an intensity that made the observing medical staff step back involuntarily. "Robert, Sarah, can you hear me?" Dr. Petrova asked, approaching cautiously. Robert nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse from disuse. "We hear you, Doctor. We're changed." Sarah sat up, her movements fluid and graceful despite weeks of inactivity. Her skin shimmered faintly, reminiscent of Prilorian bioluminescence. "It's more than physical," she added, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "We're connected in ways we don't fully understand." As the medical team began a series of tests, Robert and Sarah's new abilities became apparent. They moved within human speed and precision, anticipated questions before they were asked, and demonstrated an innate ability to interface with the facility's technology. During a strength test, Robert accidentally crushed a solid steel bar, his eyes widening in surprise. "I didn't even exert myself," he murmured, staring at his hands. Sarah, meanwhile, closed her eyes and summoned a shimmering energy field around herself. Unlike before, when the effort had left them exhausted and bleeding, she maintained it effortlessly. "It's like breathing now," she explained. "Natural, instinctive." As news of their awakening spread, the atmosphere outside the facility grew more charged. Crowds swelled, a mix of supporters and protesters. Some carried signs proclaiming Robert and Sarah as saviors, while others denounced them as abominations. Inside, Admiral Hawthorne conferred with Elder Zixara and Dr. Petrova. "We need to move them to a more secure location," he insisted. "The political situation is volatile, and we still don't know the full extent of their abilities." Before they could finalize a plan, alarms blared once again. Security feeds showed a group of armed extremists breaching the facility's outer defenses. "Protect Robert and Sarah at all costs," Hawthorne barked into his comm unit, drawing his sidearm. In the medical bay, Robert and Sarah stood, Their bodies tensed for action. They exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them in an instant. "We can help," Robert said as security personnel rushed into the room. Sarah nodded. "Let us fight. It's why we were changed after all." Despite protests from Dr. Petrova, Robert and Sarah moved towards the door. As they stepped into the corridor, the facility's lights flickered. Robert placed his hand on a nearby console, his eyes closing in concentration. Suddenly, every screen in the facility lit up with real-time tactical information. "I can see everything," he said, his voice distant. "Every camera, every sensor. I know where they are." Sarah's skin began to glow brighter, the air around her shimmering with energy. "Then let's end this quickly." As they moved through the facility, coordinating with security forces, their actions were a dance of perfect synchronization. Robert guided teams around enemy positions, while Sarah used her energy field to disable weapons and protect allies. The attackers, caught off guard by the precision of the defense, soon found themselves outmaneuvered and surrounded. As the last of them were subdued, Robert and Sarah stood in the facility's atrium, the glow of their enhanced bodies casting long shadows. Admiral Hawthorne approached, his expression a mix of awe and concern. "That was impressive, but it also confirms our fears. You've become more than we ever anticipated." Robert turned to him, his eyes now carrying a depth that seemed to look beyond the physical world. "We understand your concerns, Admiral, but we're still us, still human, and Prylorian. Just more." Sarah nodded, reaching out to take Robert's hand. As their fingers intertwined, the energy surrounding them pulsed brightly. "We want to help, to be part of shaping this new alliance, but we need to understand what we've become." Hawthorne sighed, holstering his weapon. "We've received a request from the Zarkath leader, Vexithar. He claims to have information about your transformation." Robert and Sarah exchanged another silent glance, their enhanced connection allowing for instantaneous communication. After a moment, they turned back to Hawthorne. "We'll meet with him," Robert said. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "But first, we need to address the public. The longer we hide, the worse the speculation becomes." As if on cue, the sounds of the crowd outside grew louder, a mix of cheers and angry shouts. The newly transformed pair stood tall, their bodies radiating power and purpose. "It's time," Sarah said, her voice carrying a note of perseverance. Robert nodded, squeezing her hand. "Time to face our new reality." Together they began walking towards the facility's main entrance, leaving a trail of shimmering energy in their wake. As the doors opened, revealing the chaotic scene outside, Robert and Sarah stepped forward to confront a world that was simultaneously in awe of and terrified by what they had become. The crowd fell silent as Robert and Sarah emerged, their luminescent forms casting an otherworldly glow across the gathered masses. Admiral Hawthorne stepped forward, his voice carrying over the hushed assembly. "People of Earth and Prylos, I present to you Robert Chen and Sarah Vaughn, heroes of our alliance and harbingers of a new era." As Robert and Sarah addressed the crowd, explaining their transformation and reaffirming their commitment to peace, tensions began to ease. The once divided gathering slowly united in awe of the pair's evident evolution and the possibilities it represented. In the days that followed, Robert and Sarah underwent extensive testing and debriefing. Their new abilities continued to astonish scientists and military personnel alike. However, the most crucial meeting still lay ahead. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked Sarah as they stood outside the high-security chamber where Grand Overlord Vexthar was held. Sarah nodded, her skin shimmering with anticipation. "We need answers. Whatever Vexthar knows, it could be the key to understanding what we've become." As the heavy doors slid open, Robert and Sarah entered the chamber, their combined energy field pulsing gently around them. The moment they crossed the threshold, alarms blared. The restraints holding Vexthar suddenly sparked and malfunctioned, freeing the massive Zarkath leader. Security personnel rushed forward, weapons drawn, but froze in astonishment as Vexthar dropped to one knee before Robert and Sarah. "At last," Vexthar's voice rumbled, a mix of reverence and relief. "The awakened ones stand before me." Robert tensed, ready for combat, but Sarah placed a calming hand on his arm. What do you mean, Vexthar? What do you know about us? The Zarkath leader raised his head, his cybernetic eyes gleaming. You carry within you the legacy of the precursors, the shapers of all our destinies. As Vexthar spoke, the energy field surrounding Robert and Sarah began to pulsate and expand, filling the room with a soft, otherworldly light. The Zarkath leader continued, explaining how an ancient species known as the precursors had seeded the galaxy with various life forms, including humans, Prilorians, and Zarkath. Our war, Vexthar admitted, his voice heavy with regret, was born of a misguided quest to find and control precursor technology. We believed it would elevate us to godhood, but now I see the truth. You are the fulfillment of their grand design. As if triggered by Vexthar's words, the energy field surrounding Robert and Sarah intensified. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the room, depicting beings of pure energy. The precursor's message confirmed Vexthar's story and revealed that Robert and Sarah's union had activated a long-dormant network of precursor technology spread throughout the galaxy. The chamber trembled as the hologram faded, and reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On Prylos Prime, Earth, and even Zarkath worlds, long-buried precursor artifacts were awakening. Barren planets began terraforming, polluted atmospheres cleared, and advanced technology spontaneously emerged across all species. Admiral Hawthorne burst into the room, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. We're receiving transmissions from every corner of known space. Whatever you've done, it's changing everything. Elder Zixara appeared behind him, her luminescent eyes wide with wonder. We must convene an emergency session with all spacefaring races. This discovery changes the course of galactic history. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Robert and Sarah exchanged a glance, their enhanced connection allowing for silent communication. They nodded in unison, turning to face the assembled leaders. We're ready, Robert said, his voice steady and resolute. Sarah's skin glowed brighter as she added, We'll do whatever it takes to understand this precursor legacy and use it for the benefit of all. In the weeks that followed, Robert and Sarah found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of scientific discovery and diplomatic negotiations. Their unique abilities allowed them to interface directly with the awakened precursor systems, decoding millennia of accumulated knowledge. Working tirelessly alongside scientists and leaders from various species, they began to unravel the mysteries of the precursor technology. Each breakthrough brought new marvels, clean energy sources, advanced medical treatments, and faster-than-light communication systems that spanned the galaxy. As cooperation between species grew, long-standing conflicts began to fade. The Zarkath, under Vexthar's reformed leadership, dismantled their war machine and redirected their resources towards peaceful exploration and development. The Human-Prilorian Alliance evolved into a galactic council, with Robert and Sarah serving as living bridges between all member species. Their continued genetic evolution stabilized, leaving them as embodiments of interspecies cooperation, neither fully human nor Prilorian, but something entirely new. One evening, amid the flurry of galactic diplomacy, Robert and Sarah found a moment of solitude. They stood on a balcony overlooking a bustling spaceport where ships from a dozen different species docked and departed in harmony. Did you ever imagine it would come to this? Sarah asked, her iridescent skin reflecting the starlight. Robert shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. Not in a million years, but I wouldn't change a thing. As they gazed at the stars, a small probe appeared, hovering before them. It projected a holographic message, a final gift from the precursors. The ancient beings congratulated them on fulfilling their hope for unity and peace. The probe transformed into a crystalline seed, floating gently into Sarah's outstretched hand. She looked at Robert, her eyes shining with excitement. Another key to unlock precursor knowledge, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Robert nodded, taking her free hand in his. And another adventure, waiting for us out there. As they stood on the precipice of a new era, Robert and Sarah knew their journey was just the beginning. The galaxy awaited, full of wonders to explore and secrets to uncover.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.